Most people do not fail to build real wealth because they are lazy, unintelligent, or doomed. They fail because they are aiming at the wrong target. That is the uncomfortable truth at the center of this whole conversation. People say they want wealth, but most of the time, what they are actually chasing is income, appearances, comfort, or relief. And those are not the same thing. Income can make life easier. Comfort can make life nicer. Appearances can make you look successful. Relief can make you feel better for a moment. But real wealth is something else entirely. Real wealth is a financial position that keeps working even when you are not. It is ownership. It is control. It is margin. It is resilience. It is the ability to make choices from strength instead of pressure. It is the point where your life is no longer held together by your next paycheck, your next client, your next bonus, or your next lucky month. And that is exactly why most people never reach it. Because most people spend their lives becoming better earners without ever becoming better builders. That difference is everything. A person can earn a lot and still never build wealth. A person can look successful, live in a nice area, drive a nice car, wear expensive clothes, take polished vacations, and still be financially fragile underneath all of it. On the outside, it looks like abundance. On the inside, it is often just a highly decorated dependency on continued income. That is not wealth. That is maintenance. And maintenance is exhausting. The reason this keeps happening is that modern financial life trains people to think in monthly terms. Monthly bills, monthly salary, monthly rent, monthly payments, monthly subscriptions, monthly survival. Even people who make good money often experience life as an endless cycle of inflow and outflow. Money comes in, money goes out. And if a little is left over, they call that progress. But wealth is not built monthly in that sense. Wealth is built structurally. That means the real question is not, how much do I make? The real question is, what am I turning what I make into? That is the whole game. Because if your income becomes consumption, your life may improve, but your position may not. If your income becomes debt payments, you may be stabilizing, but you are still cleaning up the past. If your income becomes status, you may feel seen, but you are not getting stronger. If your income becomes ownership, assets, cash flow, and optionality, now you are building wealth. And most people never make that shift. They stay in the income consumption loop for decades and wonder why wealth keeps feeling like something for other people. Let's make this more concrete. Imagine two people earning the exact same amount of money. One person uses most of their extra income to increase lifestyle. Better apartment, better car, better restaurants, better convenience, better image. Their life looks upgraded, and to be fair, some of those upgrades may be reasonable and deserved. But the deeper structure of their finances stays mostly the same. They still rely on active income. They still have high fixed costs. They still do not own much that pays them back. They still cannot easily step away. The other person lives well too, but they direct a meaningful portion of their surplus into assets, skills, business equity, and investments. Their life may look less impressive for a while, but their position keeps changing. Their future costs become easier to handle. Their optionality expands. Their risk goes down. Their ability to say no increases. Their money begins to produce more money. Same income, different destination. That is why most people never build real wealth. They optimize for visible success instead of invisible strength. And invisible strength is usually what matters most. One of the biggest reasons for this is that people confuse earning with owning. Earning is important. It matters. It gives you raw material. But wealth is very rarely created by earning alone. Wealth is usually created when earning is converted into something durable. A paycheck is not wealth. It is fuel. A salary is not wealth. It is an opportunity. A good month in business is not wealth. It is a moment. Wealth begins when those things are consistently converted into ownership. Ownership of what? That depends on the path. It could be business equity. It could be investments. It could be rental cash flow. It could be intellectual property. It could be digital assets. It could be productive systems. It could be an audience, a brand, a valuable company, or a portfolio of assets that compound over time. But whatever form it takes, the principle is the same. If nothing you do today continues creating value tomorrow, then wealth stays far away. That is why so many hardworking people remain financially stuck. They are working, but not accumulating productive ownership fast enough to escape dependence on labor. Now let's go one level deeper, because there is another reason most people never build real wealth. They underestimate the power of fixed costs. People love talking about income, but fixed costs decide far more than they realize. Once your life becomes expensive to maintain, your ability to build wealth shrinks dramatically, even if your income is high. This is the trap of lifestyle inflation, but I want to frame it more precisely. Lifestyle inflation is not just buying silly things. That definition is too shallow. Real lifestyle inflation is when your future becomes less flexible because your present became more expensive to carry. That is a very different problem. A larger home payment, a costly car payment, constant premium spending, too many recurring obligations, and a life built around convenience at all times may not look reckless. It may even look normal. But if those decisions consume the surplus that could have become assets, then you are financing your current identity with your future freedom. And most people do this without even noticing. They believe their standard of living is proof they are advancing. But many times, what looks like advancement is simply a more expensive treadmill. Real wealth usually requires a season, and often many seasons, of refusing to let every increase in income become a permanent increase in lifestyle. That does not mean living miserably. It means understanding timing. There is a huge difference between "I can afford this" and "this helps me build wealth." Wealthy outcomes often belong to people who know how to delay full lifestyle expansion until the asset base becomes strong enough to support it. That is why patience matters so much. And patience is difficult because the world constantly rewards the appearance of success more quickly than the structure of success. A new watch gets noticed immediately. A funded retirement account does not. A luxury trip gets admired immediately. A growing ownership stake in a business does not. A nicer car gets social approval. A strong balance sheet is quiet. So many people spend years buying visible symbols of wealth before they have built the invisible foundation of wealth. That is a losing trade. Another reason most people never build real wealth is that they never develop a serious relationship with compounding. And by compounding, I do not mean only stock market returns. I mean the broader principle that good financial decisions stack, reinforce each other, and become more powerful over time. Savings compound, skills compound, reputation compounds, business systems compound, networks compound, audiences compound, ownership compounds, discipline compounds, even clarity compounds, because the more clearly you understand money, the less often you sabotage yourself. The tragedy is that most people interrupt compounding before it gets interesting. They save, then spend. They invest, then panic. They start a business, then quit too early. They build a skill, then fail to monetize it deeply. They get momentum, then dilute it by pulling resources away too soon. Compounding requires time, repetition, and protection from impulsive decisions. It is not dramatic at first. In fact, for a while, it looks almost boring. That is why so few people stick with it long enough to see what it can really do. Real wealth often looks slow, right before it looks obvious, and most people give up during the slow-looking stage. There is also a psychological dimension here that people ignore. Most people are trained to think about money defensively, not strategically. They think about paying bills, avoiding pain, catching up, making it through the month, handling emergencies, stopping stress, and maybe rewarding themselves a little for surviving all of that. That mindset is understandable. In many cases, it is necessary at first, but real wealth building requires a transition from defensive money thinking to offensive money thinking. Defensive thinking asks, how do I survive this month? Offensive thinking asks, how do I position myself so that next year is structurally stronger? Defensive thinking asks, what can I afford? Offensive thinking asks, what can I acquire that grows in value or produces value? Defensive thinking asks, how do I reduce pressure? Offensive thinking asks, how do I build leverage? Most people never make that mental shift. So even when their income improves, their decisions remain short-range. They keep solving for immediate relief instead of long-term power. That is why even intelligent, ambitious, hard-working people can spend decades financially active without ever becoming truly wealthy. They are moving money around, but they are not moving themselves into a different financial category. So what does building real wealth actually require? First, it requires surplus. This is not glamorous, but it is non-negotiable. If there is no gap between what comes in and what must go out, wealth building is extremely hard. That surplus can come from earning more, spending less, or ideally both. But without surplus, there is nothing to direct into ownership. Second, it requires intentional allocation, not random leftover allocation, intentional allocation. Wealth builders do not just hope something will remain at the end of the month. They decide in advance what part of their income becomes future building capital. Third, it requires ownership. Again, this is the turning point. If all your financial effort ends in consumption, wealth will stay thin. You need assets, equity, investments, or systems that keep working. Fourth, it requires reinvestment. When something starts working, many people withdraw too early. They want to enjoy the visible rewards immediately. But the people who build serious wealth often reinvest heavily while the opportunity is still hot. They understand that feeding a strong machine is often smarter than upgrading their lifestyle too soon. Fifth, it requires staying power, not perfection. Staying power. There will be boring months, slow quarters, mistakes, delays, disappointments, plateaus. The wealthy path is not a straight line. It is a repeated commitment to keep building, despite the fact that the payoff is often delayed. And sixth, it requires identity. This is the advanced part that many people never talk about clearly enough. If you still see yourself as someone who spends whatever comes in, someone who needs visible proof of progress, someone who always reacts instead of plans, someone who confuses income with wealth, then your financial behavior will eventually match that identity. But if you start seeing yourself as a builder, an owner, a strategist, a steward of capital, then your decisions begin to align differently. You become less impressed by appearances and more interested in strength. You become less reactive and more deliberate. You stop asking only how to earn and start asking how to structure. That is when things begin to change. Now, none of this means everyone has the same opportunity set, the same timeline, or the same obstacles. They do not. Cost of living matters. Starting point matters. Debt matters. Family responsibilities matter. Health matters. Access matters. The path will not look identical for everyone, but the principles remain surprisingly consistent across very different lives. People who build real wealth usually do some version of the same few things. They create surplus. They direct it on purpose. They acquire ownership. They allow compounding to work. They keep fixed costs from swallowing the future. They resist the temptation to perform success before they secure it. And that last one is worth repeating. Most people never build real wealth because they start performing wealthy too early. They buy the look before they build the base. They consume the symbols before they own the systems. They celebrate income as if it were the finish line, when in reality, it was only the raw material. That is why real wealth matters as a phrase. Real wealth is not just money moving through your life. It is money staying, multiplying, and strengthening your position. It is the difference between having a big month and having a durable machine. It is the difference between looking expensive and being hard to financially break. It is the difference between being busy and being free. So if you want the real answer to why most people never build real wealth, here it is. They confuse activity with progress. They confuse income with ownership. They confuse lifestyle with strength. They interrupt compounding too early. They let fixed costs grow faster than assets. They make decisions for relief instead of leverage. And they never fully commit to becoming the kind of person who builds rather than merely earns. But here is the hopeful part. This is fixable, not instantly, not magically, not with one perfect investment or one motivational weekend. But it is absolutely fixable, because wealth is not reserved for people with perfect backgrounds. It is built by people who start understanding what the game actually is. The game is not make money and spend a little more each year. The game is convert active effort into durable ownership. The game is build a life with increasing margin and decreasing fragility. The game is let time and compounding work on assets, not just on your labor. The game is become difficult to knock backward. Once you understand that, your financial decisions begin to reorganize themselves. You become more careful about fixed costs. You become more serious about surplus. You become more interested in assets than appearances. You become more patient with boring compounding. You become more strategic with raises, profits, bonuses, and opportunities. And slowly, then noticeably, your life stops looking like a cycle and starts looking like a structure. That is when real wealth begins. Not when you look rich. Not when you have one great month. Not when people assume you are doing well. But when your money, your systems, your ownership, and your discipline start working together in a way that keeps building even when nobody is watching. That is real wealth. And the people who reach it are usually not the ones chasing the loudest signals. They are the ones quietly building the strongest foundation.